about an hour. Hold on. We have about an hour. So what I'm going to do, I'm Cindy Rinker. I'm from the Cultural Arts Center in Glen Allen. And what we're going to be doing are going over some very basic tools and techniques for doing some simple quilling projects. And quilling is the art of paper curling. And since you have your kits, you probably have an idea of that there's a lot of pieces, parts with this. There's so many different directions you can go in with quilling. But basically what you're doing is you're taking a small piece of paper and curling it and then squishing it into all kinds of shapes to create a little piece of artwork. So what I'm going to be doing is reviewing the different kinds of paper, and different sizes, and the different kinds of shapes that you can create with the tools that you have. The tools that I need you to get from your kit will be, most importantly, two things are most important, and that is the needle, the quilling needle, which has a little slot in the end of it. It's either, I don't know what colors you have. Everybody good with that? And then you'll need, of course, your paper to be, the paper that comes in strips to be open and ready to go. And you'll need your glue. And the glue that I sent is either a clear Elmer's glue in these little bottles, a clear Elmer's glue, or a white Elmer's glue, either one. So those are the three things that we're going to start with. I did want to say that there are two sizes of quilling paper that is pre-cut for you out in the world. There are two sizes of the strips. The size that you'll be using today is the 3/16, I believe is what you got in your package. The other kind, the other size, do you have 3/16 in there? I mean, you have your paper out and ready? All right. So the other size that you might run across is the 1/8, which is more narrow than the 3/16. I'm going to use the 1/8 just because, excuse me, the 3/16, just the fatter one, because it's easier to handle in my hands when I'm demonstrating. Every once in a while, I'll use the smaller paper for more dainty looks, or if it needs to be more shallow. But for the most part, I stick to the wider stuff so that my fingers can handle it. You probably got a ruler in your kit, is that correct? A measuring instrument? No.
No.
All right, and then you got the quilling, I call it a palette, it's a template with the different shapes and sizes. I'm not sure if it looks exactly like mine, but it should have some different kinds of openings for the different kinds of shapes. The numbers that you see in mine, you have, I don't know if you can see them from where you are, but 10, 10, 15, 20, that refers to the length of the strip. So if you're following a pattern that you can get online, if you're following a pattern, will indicate the length of the strip that they want you to use, and that's what the numbers are for on the palette. And that's what the ruler is for. We're not going to get into a lot of measuring today. I'd rather you know how to shape and curl and glue and all that without having to worry about the length of the strips. One thing to keep in mind when you're manipulating and when you're tearing this paper, I always choose to tear it rather than cut it with the scissors, because when you tear it, it leaves a little pulp, and that's the part you're going to glue. And when it's a little pulpy, it tends to mesh better with the piece of paper underneath it. So instead of a straight, harsh cut, the glue on a tear tends to help the paper bleed into whatever's under it. I hope that makes sense. It bonds with the paper that it's being glued to. So I like to tear. You're welcome to use your scissors to cut. I just like to tear. So couple of basic things. Oh, did you get one of these little guys in your kit?
Yeah.
So this little guy, he looks like a little man to me. Let me move this out of the way. This is to help you curl. And you can do it without using this and just twirling the paper in your hand, or this little guy helps you. There's a hole right in the middle. And you could put the quilling needle through that hole, and it will help keep the paper. It will help keep the paper on as you're twirling. I'm going to demonstrate without it because it'll be easier for you to see, but you're welcome to use that little guy to keep your paper intact as you're twirling. So if you want to watch me for just a minute before you start to twirl, I'm going to feed the paper into the little slot. And I'm going to bring it as far down to the end as I can. And then I'm going to start turning. I like to turn towards me. It's up to you. And I'm basically just winding that piece of paper up. And as you get the hang of it, then I'll put it between my fingers and I'll just start really spinning it. Now that's what you have to watch out for. It's climbing up and down the needle. So when I'm spinning it, I want to watch it just to make sure that it's staying pretty consistently on top of itself. There's no glue involved yet. No glue whatsoever involved yet. So I'm going to spin it. And then when I get to the length that I think I want, I'm going to make sure that I handle it on both sides so that when I pull it off, it doesn't turn into a little accordion. So I want to make sure I have control of both flat sides, and I'll slide the needle out like that. And then I've torn it. So that's a tight little curl. And then when I want to start to manipulate it in a shape, and before I glue it, I'm going to let it spring open just a little bit because I want it to be a little bit bigger so that I can manipulate it. I'm tapping it. I know you can't see it through my finger, but I'm tapping it so that it opens. And then at that point, I'm going to take this little end right here, and that's where my glue is going to go. Now, I did put the glue in these handy dandy little bottles with a teeny little opening. If that gets to be too frustrating for you, just pour out a little bit of glue onto a little piece of paper and use your toothpick and apply it. You don't have to use this bottle if you don't like to. I just have gotten the hang of it, and I like it because it's just gives me a little dot, because you don't need more than that little dot. Just a teeny little dot on there. And then I'm going to gently press it in. And that's where your template comes in. You can use the big cork one. I'm going to use this just because it's handy. And I'm going to put it in so that even if it springs open a little bit more, which it did. Come here. Come here. It's being held in place. So if you do it using the little guy, it's the same principle. That's going to go through, this is going to go through that middle circle. And I'm going to feed it. This is going to be turning away from me. And if I hold the little guy and just spin, it's actually helping hold the paper in place. I'm going to go all the way to the end with this guy. And then I'm going to pull him off. Make a little tear. Put a little glue. I want to keep this one tight. And then put them in my template. Does anyone have any questions about that? Go ahead and try. Go ahead and try that. Just remember, there's no glue involved until it's off the needle. We had a couple of folks put the glue on at the beginning and it glued it to the needle. So don't do that. No glue until it's off the needle. This little guy is not cooperating. Anyone have any questions?
Nope.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How do, I rolled mine too tight. It doesn't look like it just looks like a tight little roll. And how do
Okay.
you know how loose to get, like yours looks lovely, like, you know, like the center of a flower or something. How do you
Sure.
make it
Think
tight?
of it-
but
it-
not
the more
tight?
that you want to make it into a shape, the looser it needs to be. So if you have a tight little coil, it's going to be very difficult to make into a shape, to squish it.
That's what it looks like right now.
So I would let it just flex out just a little bit,
Okay.
or more than just a little bit. Let it flex out. This is an entire strip here. This one, this yellow one. I let it flex out, and I'm going to use it to demonstrate how to squish into the different shapes. Squish is a highly technical term, by the way.
Oh,
But the more condensed it is, the more difficult it will be to turn into a shape.
okay. So I'm just going to backtrack. You put the glue down after you've tapped it out?
Yes. And there will be some times when you just want a tight little coil for some designs, but for the flowers and butterflies and the larger things we'll do today, you want to be a little bit looser. Go ahead and make about half a dozen, about 6 of those. And we'll start putting some shapes, making some shapes and turning them into things. I wanted to show you a couple of other patterns. I did have the basic flower out at the beginning. These are almost little triangles around it, and then just one wide open coil in the middle. And then this is, of course, it's coiled in different directions on either end to a giant S for the stem. Butterflies. Basically, the butterfly, and we'll start to make shapes in just a minute. The butterfly is made up of teardrops, 2 large teardrops and then 2 smaller teardrops. And then the body is actually tightened at both ends, so there's not a teardrop. And then just some very loose coils, straight line and then a loose coil for the antenna. And these flowers, see if we can get in focus, are just a lot of little teardrops, and there's your tightly coiled center where you wouldn't let it open up at all. At first glance, it doesn't look like quilling, but let's see if we can get it focused at all. You've got a tight little coil for the eye, and then a white coil on the outside added to that. And then these are basically just very short pieces of paper that have been pinched at both ends for his body and his wings, and even his tail. And then little teardrops for the little bitty flowers. When you do something this small and this meticulous, you'll pull out the tweezers. Did you get tweezers in your kit? Yeah, that's what the tweezers are for the tiny little things that you might need to manipulate. All right, I need to make my little center real quick. I'm just going to do a very simple flower just to give you an idea. The glue dries fairly quickly. So if I wanted to do a simple little flower with these guys, space-wise, you're supposed to, I heard tell, you're supposed to have an odd number of flower petals. So I'm going to do one more. And then we're going to just shape them into teardrops by lightly pinching one end.
Working okay?
Yeah.
We have a roller like that somewhere.
Hmm?
We have a roller like that somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere.
Can she hear us?
Yeah, probably on the phone.
All right, so very gently. And as you're pinching, if you have some extra ones that you can just practice with, but as you're pinching, let me make sure you can see this. You're manipulating not only the outside, but also the inside coils as you're pinching. So if you were to squish from the very middle, then that inside piece would also be flattened in the middle. So when you're doing the teardrop, you kind of want to let this center migrate up to one end, as opposed to getting caught in the pinched end of the teardrop. So don't know how well you can see that. Can you see where the center? Yeah, you can see where the center is on that. And just lightly pinch one end for your petals. And I'm actually using this hand to manipulate where that centerpiece is going to kind of flow to. I'm going to do one where it's stuck on the other end just so you can see what it looks like. You may like it so that it's tighter. So now, not only do you have a little flower, but you also have the start of a butterfly. If you wanted to make two smaller ones for the bottom. So now you have the question of what do you want to do with this? Do you want this to be on the front of a card? And I think I packed cards in everyone's, a greeting card, kind of blank greeting card. Do you want it to be a little piece of artwork similar to this that will go in a frame? And these will go into a deeper frame. I have a little shadow box kind of thing. It wasn't too expensive. I think I got it back when, I tell you what, I am going to age myself. Ben Franklin craft store. It's where I got those. And it also has a little piece of foam core in there. This little white thing is a piece of foam core to lift the mat board off of the back, the paper that the quilling's on. So it floats a little bit. So is it going to be a piece of artwork, or would you like it to be something that's freestanding? See if I have them. Where's my turkey? There's my turkey. This is a little turkey I made. And then with the idea of it being an ornament. So if you're thinking about it, Christmas ornaments, they make beautiful Christmas ornaments.
It reminds me of when my mother-in-law tried to teach me crocheting, and how it's like you're either too tight or you're too loose, and kind of getting that, what's that right
Well,
accent tightness.
Quilling is probably more forgiving than crocheting. I've tried crocheting myself. So you need to determine, the next step is determined by what you want to do with it. So if it's going to be freestanding, then it's a little more difficult in the gluing the pieces together than if it were going to be glued to a piece of paper. If I were going to be gluing this into a flower on a piece of paper, I could actually put the glue on the paper itself. So, and that's probably the easier way to do it. You don't need a lot, but you do need to make sure that a lot of the bottom side has contact with that glue or it won't stick. So I'm going to push down that middle, push down the middle to make sure that it hits that glue. And then you can just glue each piece down where you'd want it to be on the card. Now, if it's going to be freestanding and not glued to a backboard, it's a little more difficult, but you just have to have patience, and you have to kind of guide the glue to the middle of the piece of paper, the middle of the strip, so that you don't end up gluing it to the paper anyway or whatever it's resting on. So I'm going to take these two, I have the glue just down the center, and then I'm going to take these two and gently push them together. And I'm going to hold them for just a second. And then I'll put it down to make sure that they kind of hug each other a little bit before I put it down on the paper. Because I definitely don't want it to stick to the paper. And then I will go and do the same thing all the way around. Now, if you're just going to be gluing the very tippy tips, these up here, you put a good amount of glue right there at the tip, and not just in the middle, but put a good glob of glue there and push the two pieces together so that they get a good strong bond at the end. So that's the teardrop. I call it the eye, but this is the same principle. It's just pinched on both ends instead of just at one end. And I really manipulate it so that that centerpiece stays in the center, if that's where I want it. If I am truly going to make some eyes, then maybe I do want it to be over to the side a little bit more so that it really looks like the eyes are looking at you. Or you can keep that in the center. It depends on what again, what you're going to be using this piece for. Okay, this is one I did earlier, this purple piece. And because I wasn't paying attention, the glue seeped out a little bit where I glued it to the piece underneath it. And now it's stuck to the board. So just be aware of that. All right, so triangle. Triangle, you're just going to be manipulating. And since you have 3 flat sides, you want to go ahead and form a triangle with your fingers. So I'm pinching 2 on one side and 1 on the other until it forms a triangle. All right, I'm going to coil a new piece for a heart. If you want larger coils, then you just simply glue 2 of the strips together. I believe you got straight pins straight pin needles with your kit as well that don't have the slots in them. There are folks out there that like to use regular needles to do their quilling, the ones without the slots. Did you all get one of those with your kit? Yeah. That's how quilling originated, of course, without the slots. In the 1800s, women were looking for new ways to be creative. It takes a woman to figure this stuff out. Sorry, guys. But, and they just used their regular needles and started twirling scrap paper strips around needles to start quilting. So the heart takes a little bit of manipulating. Now I'm actually going to find where I glued it, which is right here. And that's where I'm going to pinch the bottom of the heart. So I've got the teardrop going. And I'm going to just gently start pushing in the middle. And with my other fingers, I'm going to pull up the two sides.
Hey, Ross.
Yes.
What you doing?
What are you doing?
Squish a little bit too much on the bottom.
You show them your work?
Nah. I keep it to myself, Jay.
Okay.
It's just for my own enjoyment. What you doing? What
Is it
you doing?
therapeutic?
It is. It is.
That's good.
Yeah, it does. It really does. You know.
Got your little art corner here.
Yeah, got my little art corner. I'm a little, you know.
Have you tried to draw that face yet?
What face?
So you might want to mute your microphone if you don't want to share your conversations. We're happy to hear them. But so the hearts are a little bit more difficult. How are we doing on time? Oh, we have 25 minutes. While you're coiling, while you continue to coil for whatever work of art you're going to be putting down, I'm going to show you what a couple of the other tools are for. So you have straight pins in your kits.
Yep, yes.
Those are also to help hold pieces together as you're gluing. So if I'm going to be gluing petals together, they will hold those petals in place on your corkboard until they glue. One way you use them. I also cut myself some squares of regular corkboard for larger pieces that you want to do. or more intricate pieces. So this happy, for instance, I don't know if you can see on the side. That is actually the outside of the letters. If you wanted to do words, the outside of the letters are actually straight strips of paper. So that this is a strip that goes all the way around, stops right there. And the other side of it goes all the way around and connects here. So they put a couple of pieces of paper together to create that happy. And when they did that, that's where the straight pins would have come in to hold those tight while the glue was drying. So they would have put one there in all the corners to keep that piece of paper straight from moving back down. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you
Yeah.
can use the straight pins on the cork to control the shape of whatever it is you're creating, so that it doesn't just bounce back to where it started. I also put some little shapes in your kits. Those were just from punches, from hole punches. And those are just to add, to embellish whatever you're working on. I know that when I did a class with kids, we used the trees as a starting point, and they did all kinds of crazy curls coming off of the tree off the tree branches. It was beautiful. So that was a starting point. When they did the butterfly, they started with the paper butterfly, and then they created the next size up in quilling paper and the next size up in bigger quilling paper. So it was a tiny start, and it blossomed into a full-blown large butterfly about that big, made out of quilling strips. So kids were so creative doing this. Any questions?
Not so far.
Okay. I'm going to do a couple of more things here. 640. Yes. I'm going to curl the ends in opposite directions to create the S shape. Now, if I wanted to stretch that S shape out, again, that's where the pins would come in handy. If I was gluing it down or to something else. So if you wanted to maintain this S, to maintain this shape, you would actually use a little bit of glue in different places. You'd use, see, probably right here, just a little couple of drops of glue would hold this together. And up here, couple of little drops of glue in between some of these layers, and that would help hold that S shape, especially in this right here, where the paper meets the curve, a little drop of glue, and then where the paper meets the curve down here, a little drop of glue.
Can you show how you use the pin, like what you're, from this angle, I'm not necessarily sure. Are you going through multiple layers of the rings, or is it
No, I'm not touching the paper at all.
Okay.
Yeah, these two are both in the center right now. Oh, sorry.
There we
They're
go.
both center right now.
Okay.
But you can place them and they're actually serving as braces. So I could actually put, if I wanted to, I might want to put one over here. Oh, that doesn't help. If I wanted to put one right here to hold that curve, if I was gluing it down. So you can manipulate with the straight pins.
Oh, okay.
That help?
Yep. Thank you.
Now, if you do decide to accept the challenge of a letter, it's tough, but the way you're going to glue this paper down, you want to glue the straight strips down first, and then add the outside shapes after you have those down. And the way you do that is you take that strip and you run it through a glue. You don't use the dropper on this, but pour some glue out on a piece of paper, and then you just take the strip and just run it through the glue like that. Just run it through the glue. It's hard to show you in the camera. So that just the bottom of the strip has the glue on it, and then you start to manipulate. Wanted to show you a couple more things. The sun, both ends are going in opposite directions. So you start with the pinched ends, and then you curve that one way and the other one the other way. So then you have some pretty little curves in opposite directions. And that's how the pieces on the sun are made, with them just going in opposite directions. And then the rain, which I'm thinking this is, although I'm not positive, but I think the rain, these are just huge tight coils with a little raindrop on, a teardrop as a raindrop on those. This guy is just a lot of pinched little pieces, creating the big one. And here are some tight coils for you. If you can see those okay. Queen Anne's lace, all of these are just little tight coils. And then this is one strip of paper on its side, And if you can see, there's a shadow here, which means that the paper is not glued all the way down the paper. It's glued up here and it's glued down here. So it pops up off the paper and creates these beautiful little shadows. And then they just piled little white and green coils on top of each other for those. And then the large butterfly that basically has some long, narrow teardrops. Get in focus for you. Little tight white coils. And what they did was they laid all these down first into this pattern. And then they took a piece of black, a strip of black, and they just outlined the wings in that one strip of black paper to give it a nice monarch black and gold color. The body is just the round coil pinched on both ends. And then you've got a little coil and then the strip of paper from that same coil coming down for the antenna. And all of these guys are just straight on their edge pieces of paper.
Cindy, someone asked a question in chat that says, how do we use the other tool without the slot?
You put it in a drawer and close the drawer. So it's a needle. What you're gonna, let me grab one real quick. Hold on. It's a lot more frustrating than the slot. However, let me grab one and I'll show you. So one of the benefits of using a straight needle to a slotted tool is that oftentimes in the center, when you're using a slotted tool, the center of a coil won't be perfectly round. There'll be a little indent, a little square or corner in the middle where it was pinched up against the slot. The benefit of using a straight needle is that it's continuously round. It's round the whole way through. There's not that little pinch in the very center. That little pinch doesn't bother me as much as using this needle does. But let me grab a piece of paper. It's the same principle. You just don't have the slot, but you can still start it and coil it the same way as you would using the slot. Does that answer your question? I hope. So I'm still twirling. It takes a little bit more attention because you don't have that slot to hold it in place. So you have to constantly tighten it up and keep twirling. And it slides off nicely too. I hope that answers your question. It does take a little longer, but it does make a nice round center as opposed to maybe a little bit of pinch in the other one.
Thank you.
You still don't put the glue on until the very end. A lot of folks want to put glue on these so it'll hold the piece of paper on while they're twirling, but don't do that because it'll be very difficult to get off. I hope that answered the question.
It did, thank you.
You're welcome. This piece is a cut silhouette out of a black piece of paper. Someone cut that out and then just made this beautiful dress using very tight little coils. And this butterfly was probably a hole punch to start with, like the butterfly I gave you, with the wings bent up. And glued down, which makes a very pretty little design. There's another silhouette, but it's created using just a strip of paper, glued down and manipulated. I would encourage you to try different things. If you have special images that you really like, to go ahead and lightly draw the image on the paper and then just take your strip of paper and follow along that line that you drew. It takes a little while because you need to make sure that it's continuously glued on the bottom of the strip. And that's what the Q-tip is for. What I'll use the Q-tip for, I think I put Q-tips in with your kits. I'll saturate that Q-tip with glue, and then as I'm laying a strip down, I'll have a Q-tip go underneath the bottom to continuously dampen with glue the bottom of the strip. Because there's no way, if it's a long strip and you pull it through the glue, by the time you get to the end of that strip, that glue will be dry. So that Q-tip's just to keep the bottom of the strip wet with glue as you're laying down a longer piece. And again, for instance, in the note, again, this straight up and down piece, which I don't know if you can tell that is, but this is a straight up and down piece, was probably put down first. And then the little coils were put and arranged after that glue had dried along that strip. Cat's one of my favorites. They created single loops. Instead of a coil, these are just single little loops. I cannot even imagine how long that took, but it is beautiful. And there are more single strips of paper in this one than there are coils. There's not many coils in that one at all. And then a very simple design for the crab. Again, it's the outside and then just strips on the inside. Couple little coils. Those were done with coils originally. Questions? Are you running into any problems while you're doing this? No?
No.
It can be very therapeutic or it can be very tedious, whichever mood you happen to be in. But I tend to make a lot of coils to start with, and so that I have a lot of sizes and a lot of colors, a lot by like 50 or 60, all ready to go. And then I can start to think about how I'm going to use those in a design or a pattern. That's less tedious for me if I already have my art medium ready to paint with, per se, than if I had to make each color as I go along. It's not to say I don't add, but I start with a lot of coils in the beginning and a lot of different sizes. And keep them in my little Tupperware container. Well, let me show you this one other idea as well. So this was started as a dark, you can't tell it's a dark green, but it's a very dark green. And then after it was coiled and pinched, I added a piece of gold to the outside so that you can create another layer to your pieces. And I just glued it, a real pretty little strip of gold to the outside. If you're going to add, since we have a few more minutes, oh wow, it's 6:55. If you're going to add strips together, go back to that, what I said at the beginning about tearing. Tear both of them. This already has a tear, so that when you glue those two pieces together, they're going to overlap a little bit. When you glue the overlap, the pulp from the inside of the strip tends to blend and bleed into the other strip more easily than if it was just two sharp edges. So it'll kind of just blend right into the one underneath it. They make beautiful cards. I've seen a lot. I did not do this bird, by the way. I did not make the bird. Didn't quite have the patience for a bird, but I bought this as a card in a greeting card shop. So there are a lot of quilling is coming back. And Christmas ornaments. I've seen a lot of Christmas ornaments. This one has gone through being handled a lot, but that used to be balanced. It used to be really, really pretty. But you can see all the intricate little coils I did, and it became a really pretty little ornament. And I think I showed you the other ornament, but you can experiment. And this has the little coils, squished coils on the end, in the middle, and then just the straight strips of paper and with curls on the end to make a pretty little ornament. Thank you all. I hope if you have questions, I'd like to answer them, but it's pretty simple. Coil and squish.
Yeah, I do have a quick question about the glue because it's a syringe kind of thing. Do you have to, when you're done using it, do you have to wipe it down with a sponge or something?
don't. I just put that rub, make sure I put that rubber tip on it. And it does not clog for some reason, but a straight pin does fit down in there. So if you need to unclog it, or if you want to put a straight pin in it instead of the rubber thing, a straight pin should fit right down in there.